What if the war in Ukraine is not the endgame for Russia, but only the opening move in a much larger plan that could drag all of Europe into conflict? This is the fear quietly spreading through NATO's military circles, because many Western intelligence officials now believe that destroying Ukraine as a sovereign nation is not Russia's final goal, but rather the first step in a wider campaign that could threaten NATO itself, starting with the Baltic states that sit directly on Russia's border. Among those countries, Estonia stands out, not because it is large or powerful, but because it understands one brutal truth of modern warfare. If Russia ever decides to move west, Estonia will be hit first, and it will be hit fast. That realization has pushed Estonia together with its NATO allies to begin building something extraordinary, something designed not to win a war outright, but to slow it down, trap it, and give the rest of NATO the time it needs to respond. Estonia is now constructing a massive secret network of hardened bunkers that will stretch across its eastern regions, forming part of what is known as the Baltic Defense Line, a defensive system meant to turn any Russian invasion into a slow, costly nightmare. On December 17th, Estonia's Centre for Defence Investments confirmed that preparatory work had begun on the first 5 bunkers in the forests of southeast Estonia. But these 5 are only the beginning of something much larger, because Estonia plans to build a total of 600 bunkers by the end of 2027, scattered across northeast and southeast Estonia in locations chosen specifically because they are likely invasion routes for Russian ground forces. These bunkers are not symbolic structures or political gestures, they are designed for real combat, built to withstand direct hits from 152mm artillery shells, one of the most commonly used weapons in the Russian military, and each bunker will be placed as part of a wider trap, meant to funnel Russian troops, tanks, and armored vehicles into kill zones, where they can be slowed, targeted, and eventually destroyed. Estonia is also digging up to 40 kilometers of anti-tank trenches to further block movement, forcing Russian forces to move where Estonia wants them to move, not where they choose. This project did not start overnight, and in fact, it was delayed by more than a year due to procurement problems, largely because construction companies were initially asked to bid on building all 600 bunkers without being told their exact locations, information that Estonia refuses to make public for security reasons. Rather than compromise secrecy, Estonia chose to slow the process and roll out the bunker construction in stages, releasing location details only to the builders involved at each phase. This decision reflects a lesson learned directly from the war in Ukraine. Fortifications are only useful if the enemy does not know exactly where they are. Estonia understands that it is better to have fewer bunkers that Russia cannot locate than a completed network whose coordinates have already leaked into Russian intelligence files. These bunkers are just one part of a much broader strategy tied to the Baltic Defense Line, an agreement signed in January 2024 by Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, committing all 3 nations to build a shared defensive barrier along NATO's eastern flank. The logic behind this line is simple but deadly effective. Delay the enemy, absorb the first UDAR, and buy time for NATO's overwhelming military power to arrive. Latvia has already begun reinforcing its eastern border and plans to spend more than €300 million over 5 years on trenches, obstacles, and fortifications, while Lithuania is building multi-layered defenses stretching up to 50 kilometers from its borders, including bridges designed to be destroyed quickly to block Russian advances. Together, these defenses form a layered system designed to grind down any invasion force before it can break through. Estonia's bunkers are meant to act as a tripwire defense, meaning Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuanian troops become both the first line of resistance and the early warning system for the rest of NATO. If Russia invades, its forces will immediately collide with these defenses, alerting NATO and triggering a massive response involving troops, air power, and long-range strikes. The goal is not necessarily to stop Russia on day one, but to slow it enough that NATO can turn the Baltic region into a battlefield. Russia cannot win. However, Estonia's planners are not blind to the realities of modern warfare, and they openly acknowledge that these bunkers are not invincible. While the structures are designed to withstand artillery fire, modern threats such as Shad-style drones and Russian glide bombs present serious challenges. Russia has dramatically increased its production of long-range attack drones, with facilities like the Alabuga plant reportedly planning to manufacture tens of thousands of Jiran-2 drones. The Russian version of the Iranian Shahd, while glide bombs have become one of Moscow's most destructive weapons in Ukraine. Ukrainian officials report that Russia has already used tens of thousands of glide bombs, and intelligence suggests Moscow may be stockpiling even more for future conflicts. Estonia's bunkers are unlikely to survive a direct hit from a large glide bomb, but once again, Estonia is betting on secrecy. A weapon, no matter how powerful, is useless if the attacker does not know where to aim it, and Estonia's entire strategy is built around forcing Russia to fight blind. Russia knows the bunkers exist, it knows roughly which regions they are in, but it does not know their exact locations, meaning any invasion would still walk into a prepared trap. Estonia's urgency is driven by a growing consensus among European leaders that Russia may be preparing for a much wider war. Intelligence officials across NATO have warned that Moscow is rebuilding its military faster than expected, adapting its tactics in Ukraine, and preparing for future confrontations. Some NATO leaders have openly stated that Europe must be ready for war within the next 5 years, with warnings that Russia could test NATO's resolve by attacking one of its smaller members. Russia dismisses these warnings as fear-mongering, but its actions tell a different story. The war in Ukraine has already become the largest and bloodiest conflict in Europe since World War II, and Russia has shown it is willing to absorb massive losses to achieve its goals. Estonia, a small country with limited manpower, understands that it cannot defeat Russia alone in a conventional fight, so it has shifted its strategy toward denial rather than punishment, focusing on making invasion so slow, painful, and costly that it becomes strategically unattractive. To support this approach, Estonia has increased its defense spending to nearly 5% of its GDP, one of the highest levels in NATO, investing heavily in fortifications, mobility denial, and coordination with allied forces. Geography makes Estonia particularly vulnerable, because in some places the country is less than 200 kilometers wide, meaning Russian forces could theoretically overrun large areas before NATO reinforcements arrive if no defenses were in place. The bunkers, trenches, and obstacles are meant to prevent exactly that scenario, turning Estonia's terrain into a maze of obstacles that slow armor, restrict movement, and expose attacking forces to counterattacks. Some sections of the Baltic defense line are even designed to be abandoned and destroyed quickly if necessary, preventing Russian forces from capturing and using NATO fortifications against their creators. This approach reflects another hard lesson from Ukraine. Flexibility matters, and static defenses must be paired with mobility and firepower to be effective. The Baltic defense line is also meant to be visible in a strategic sense. Russia is supposed to know that it exists, even if it does not know its exact layout. This visibility forces Moscow to plan around the defenses, slowing decision-making and increasing uncertainty. As military analysts have pointed out, fortifications are not just about stopping an enemy physically, they are about shaping the battlefield psychologically, forcing the attacker into bad choices that expose weaknesses and create opportunities for counterstrikes. Estonia's bunkers are a direct challenge to Russia's strategy of rapid, overwhelming force, signaling that any attempt to seize Baltic territory will be contested from the very first meter. This strategy also serves a political purpose, reinforcing NATO's credibility by showing that its eastern members are not passive targets, but active participants in their own defense. Estonia hopes that the sheer cost and complexity of fighting through these defenses will be enough to deter Russia from ever testing them. If deterrence fails, the bunkers are designed to buy time, and in modern warfare, time is everything. Every hour that Russian forces are delayed is an hour for NATO aircraft to deploy, for reinforcements to move, and for supply lines to be established. Estonia's leaders understand that once NATO is fully engaged, the balance of power shifts dramatically against Russia. This is why the bunkers matter. Even if they cannot stop every weapon or survive every strike, they are not meant to be indestructible fortresses, but tools in a larger system designed to turn a fast invasion into a slow disaster. Border incidents and Russian probing actions have only reinforced Estonia's sense of urgency, with reports of Russian personnel briefly crossing into Estonian territory, serving as reminders that tensions remain dangerously high. Estonia sees these actions as tests, attempts to measure NATO's response and probe for weakness. By investing heavily in visible, tangible defences, Estonia is sending a clear message. It is ready, it is prepared, and it will not be caught off guard. Other NATO countries are taking similar steps, with officials in the United Kingdom and elsewhere warning their populations to prepare for the possibility of large-scale conflict, a message that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. The reality is that Europe is rearming, fortifying, and mentally preparing for a future that many hoped would never return. Estonia's 600 bunkers are a symbol of that shift, representing a move away from complacency and toward hard, physical defense in an age dominated by drones, missiles, and precision weapons. Whether these bunkers ever see combat remains to be seen, but their existence already shapes the strategic landscape, forcing Russia to account for them in its planning. In the end, Estonia is doing what small states have always done when faced with larger, more aggressive neighbours. It is making itself too costly to conquer. If war comes, these bunkers will not stand alone. They will stand as the first line in a much larger NATO response that could define the future of Europe. And if war does not come, then perhaps these hidden fortresses will have done their job simply by existing. Now I want to know what you think. Do you believe Estonia's bunker strategy can really stop Russia, or will it only delay the inevitable? Drop your thoughts in the comments, like the video if you found this breakdown useful, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the real conflicts shaping the world right now.